quite cross, but the sun's been quite kind.
The world knew Elton John as a spectacle, as feather bows and platform boots and oversized glasses and a piano that seemed to levitate off the stage on pure charisma alone. What the world sometimes forgets is how close none of it came to happening. Before the costumes and the stadiums and the greatest hits compilations, there was a shy, overweight kid from a suburban town outside London who couldn't get anyone to pay attention no matter how hard he tried. The song that changed everything didn't arrive with fanfare or industry machinery behind it. It arrived quietly, written in 10 minutes, almost left off the album entirely. And when it finally reached the right ears in the right room on the right night, it didn't just launch a career.
But these things I do, you see, I've forgotten.
It announced one of the most extraordinary talents the 20th century would produce. This is that story. Let's begin. The Boy from Pinner. The year is 1947. Pinner is a quiet suburban town in Middlesex, on the outer edges of Greater London, the kind of place where nothing much happens and nobody much expects it to. Reginald Kenneth Dwight is born here into a household that is comfortable enough but not warm. His father is a Royal Air Force trumpet player, disciplined and distant, who has little time for his son. And even less understanding of what his son is becoming. What Reginald is becoming is obvious almost from the moment he can reach a piano keyboard. He is playing by ear at 3 years old, picking out melodies he has heard on the radio with an accuracy that stops adults in their tracks. Show me that you love me. By 6, he is playing recognizable songs from memory. By 11, he had earned a scholarship to the Royal Academy of Music in London, where he studied on weekends while attending regular school during the week. The classical training gives him a technical foundation that will inform everything he does for the rest of his career, but the music that pulls at him is not Chopin or Bach. It is Jerry Lee Lewis. It is Little Richard. It is the sound coming out of America that is rewriting what popular music was allowed to be. As a teenager, he began playing in pub bands and local groups, building a live performance instinct that no academy can teach. He is good. Everyone around him knows he is good. But good in Pinner in 1963 is not the same as getting anywhere. In 1967, he responded to an advertisement placed by Liberty Records looking for new songwriting talent. He cannot write lyrics. He is paired with a 17-year-old from Lincolnshire named Bernie Taupin, who sends him a stack of handwritten words through the post. Reginald Dwight sits at his piano, reads the first lyric, and starts to play. Everything begins here, the missing piece. Bernie Taupin had never written a song lyric before the Liberty Records advertisement. He was a teenager from a rural farming community in Lincolnshire who had grown up reading voraciously and absorbing the landscape around him in a way that would eventually pour itself into some of the most recognizable words in popular music. When the advertisement asked for aspiring songwriters, he sent in a handful of poems and waited. Across London, Reginald Dwight did the same. Dick James, the music publisher running the talent search, looked at both submissions and made a decision that would reverberate through the next 5 decades. He paired them together. I want to love you like a lover should. You're fine, so kind. What followed was one of the most unusual creative partnerships in the history of popular music. Elton and Bernie barely knew each other when it started. They met in person only briefly before settling into a working process that defied every conventional understanding of how songs get written. Bernie wrote the lyrics first, always. He would finish a set of words and hand them to Elton, who would sit at the piano and set them to music, sometimes in minutes, sometimes in less. They rarely wrote in the same room. The conversation between them happened entirely through the material itself. Bernie's words landing on Elton's piano and transforming into something neither of them could have produced alone. In the early years, they lived together in the same house, two young men writing obsessively and waiting for the world to notice. They wrote songs for other artists. They wrote songs that went nowhere. They wrote constantly because writing was the only thing that felt like it was moving in the right direction, even when nothing was breaking through. The partnership had a particular quality that was hard to define but impossible to miss once you heard it. Bernie wrote from the outside, observing and imagining. Elton translated that observation into pure feeling. Together, they were something neither was alone. The struggle. The first album arrived in 1969, and the world did not notice. Empty Sky was the product of everything Elton and Bernie had been building through 2 years of constant work, and it disappeared almost without trace. No significant chart positions, no radio play, no critical attention beyond a handful of polite notices in the music press that praised the potential without acknowledging the achievement. For a less committed pair of young men, it might have been the end. For Elton and Bernie, it was simply the condition they were operating in. Elton continued building his live reputation in small London venues, developing a performance style that was beginning to attract genuine attention from people who saw it firsthand, but had no mechanism to communicate that excitement to a wider audience. The Dick James Music Publishing deal gave them financial stability that allowed them to keep working without the immediate pressure of commercial survival, but it did not solve the fundamental problem. Nobody outside a small circle of industry insiders had any idea who Elton John was. The second album was the decisive moment. Producer Gus Dudgeon was brought in, a man with a clear sonic vision and the discipline to execute it. Arranger Paul Buckmaster was recruited to provide orchestral arrangements that would give the songs a scale and a beauty that the first album had entirely lacked. The combination of Dudgeon's production instincts and Buckmaster's arrangements would prove to be exactly the right frame for what Elton and Bernie were creating. But frames only work if the paintings inside them are worth hanging. The label needed something commercial. The pressure was real and growing. Elton and Bernie sat down and began writing the songs that would become their second album. One of those songs would take 10 minutes to write and the rest of their lives to live up to. One Last Chance. The sessions for the second album carried a weight that the Empty Sky sessions had not. There was a clearer understanding now of what was at stake. The label had been patient. Gus Dudgeon had been brought in specifically because the situation required intervention. This was not a routine album cycle. This was a last serious attempt to turn genuine talent into commercial reality before the industry moved on to the next promising act waiting in line behind them. Bernie felt the pressure in the way he always felt things, quietly and internally, channeling it directly into the writing. He sat down and wrote a lyric about something very simple. A young man who loves someone but has nothing impressive to offer. No grand gestures, no expensive gifts, just the honest fact of his feelings and the inadequacy he feels trying to express them. It was a lyric drawn from personal experience, from the specific feeling of being young and earnest and not quite knowing how to close the distance between what you feel and what you can say. He handed it to Elton. Elton sat at the piano, and the melody arrived in approximately 10 minutes, not as a rough sketch to be refined later, as the thing itself, complete and fully formed. Even then, even with Buckmaster's arrangement surrounding it, and Dudgeon's production giving it shape and warmth, there were serious conversations about whether the song belonged on the album at all. It was considered too simple, too quiet, too understated for a band trying to make an impact in a noisy market. The decision to include it was made almost as an afterthought, without any particular expectation that it would be the song that changed anything. That decision would turn out to be the most consequential afterthought in Elton John's career. Your Song. Your song begins with a piano and a voice, and almost nothing else. No elaborate production, no dramatic introduction. Just Elton at the keyboard, playing a melody so clean and so direct that it creates an immediate sense of intimacy.
My gift is my song, yeah, and this one's for you.
As though he is playing it specifically for the person sitting closest to him. Bernie's lyric is a masterclass in honest simplicity. The narrator doesn't know much, but he knows he loves the person he is singing to, and he is going to say so without dressing it up. The famous line about not having a lot of money But the gift, being his song, is not a clever conceit. It is a genuinely felt admission of limitation that somehow becomes the most romantic thing in the room. Paul Buckmaster's string arrangement enters gradually, lifting the song without overwhelming it, giving it a scale that feels earned rather than imposed. Elton's vocal performance is vulnerable in a way that his later recordings, for all their brilliance, rarely matched. He sounds young and uncertain and completely sincere. The song was released as a single in the United States in late 1970 and began climbing the Billboard Hot 100. But the moment that truly made Elton John was not a chart position. It was a Tuesday night in August 1970 at the Troubadour Club in Los Angeles. Elton walked onto that stage largely unknown outside a small circle of industry insiders, and within the first song had the entire room on its feet. Leon Russell was in the audience that night. He turned to the people around him and told them they had just witnessed a star being born. The review in the Los Angeles Times the following morning said something similar. By the end of that week, the music industry in America had a new name it could not stop saying: The Impact. Your song opened a door that 2 years of trying had kept firmly shut, and what came through that door was extraordinary. The Elton John album became both a critical and commercial breakthrough, establishing him simultaneously as a serious artist and a genuine pop phenomenon in a way that almost never happens at the same time. The American audience responded with an immediacy and an enthusiasm that surprised even the people closest to him. Here was an English piano player who looked nothing like a rock star and sounded like nothing else on the radio, and the American public simply decided it loved him. The flamboyance began to emerge almost immediately after the breakthrough, as though the commercial validation had given him permission to become fully himself in public. The glasses got bigger. The costumes got wilder. The stage presence expanded to fill whatever room he was playing in, and then expanded further to fill rooms he hadn't played yet. What followed was one of the most remarkable creative runs in the history of popular music. Honky Chateau in 1972. Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player in 1973. Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, also in 1973. A double album that is still considered one of the greatest records ever made. Caribou in 1974. Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy in 1975. Album after album after album, each one arriving before the audience had fully absorbed the last one, all of them selling millions and producing singles that embedded themselves permanently in the cultural memory of an entire generation. By 1975, Elton John was the biggest-selling solo recording artist on the planet, a long way from Pinner, a long way from the Liberty Records advertisement, a long way from the 10 minutes at a piano that started all of it. Legacy. The story of Elton John after the breakthrough is not a simple upward line. It never is with anyone who burns that bright that fast. The late 70s brought commercial overextension and a creative thinning that even his most devoted supporters had to acknowledge. The 80s brought addiction, cocaine and alcohol-consuming years that should have produced more music and instead produced chaos and excess, and a version of himself he has spoken about since, with a clear-eyed honesty that is itself a form of courage. A vocal cord operation in 1987 altered his voice permanently, taking the upper register that had defined his early recordings and replacing it with something lower and rougher that took years to learn to use. But Elton John did not disappear. He got sober. He rebuilt. He returned to the studio and to the stage with a seriousness of purpose that the wilderness years had, paradoxically, given him. The partnership with Bernie Taupin never broke. Through every personal crisis, every professional stumble, every period of excess and recovery, the two men from opposite ends of England kept writing together. In September 1997, 4 days after the death of Princess Diana, Elton performed a rewritten version of Candle in the Wind at her funeral in Westminster Abbey. The recording became one of the best-selling singles in the history of recorded music. The Rocketman biopic in 2019 told his story with a theatricality that felt appropriate for a life that had always contained its own spectacular quality. The Farewell Yellow Brick Road Tour, launched in 2018, became one of the highest-grossing concert tours in history. A Boy from Pinner, who almost didn't make it. A song written in 10 minutes. A Tuesday night in Los Angeles when a room full of strangers heard something and knew immediately that it mattered. Some beginnings contain everything that follows. Your song was that beginning. Elton John almost never happened. The album almost didn't get made. The song almost didn't make the cut. And on a Tuesday night in Los Angeles, in a small club on Santa Monica Boulevard, almost everything became everything. One performance, one song, one piano player from a town nobody had heard of, playing something so honest it stopped a room cold. That is how legends begin. Not with a grand plan, with a 10-minute melody and the nerve to play it out loud.